All right, everyone, we are back with another episode of the Kyle Lanslone Show. And once again, today I am bringing on a guest. Today is my boss at the Libertarian Institute. He is the director there, the editorial director of antiwar.com, the author of several books now, Fool's Errand, Enough Already, and also the definitive and definitely definitive take on the lead up to the war in Ukraine, how and why that happened, Provoked, how Washington started the new Cold War with Russia, and the catastrophe in Ukraine. Scott, welcome to the show. Scott, you might be muted. I don't think I heard you there.
Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm sorry. Take two. Thanks, Kyle. Happy to be here with you, man.
Well, excited to have you here today, Scott, particularly because last week you were on the Piers Morgan show. And I actually wrote one of our Libertarian Institute debriefs, our email blast that we put out through the Institute every night, about how amazing it is that now in this new media environment where the mainstream corporate news, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News doesn't control everything, there are these real confrontations that are happening on these YouTube shows like Piers Morgan, where you get to take on not just retired generals, but Christopher Steele, the man who invented maybe the most nefarious conspiracy theory in American history. I mean, when you look at what's now happened in Ukraine, I think Russiagate is a central part of that. And Christopher Steele is really the origins behind that. And you got to confront him, take him on, and take him to task for what he did to the American people. I mean, this was absolutely amazing. And so I have a clip of that to play for everyone before we actually talk about it. Let's play the first clip.
Everything that he said about Manafort and Page and all of these people in the Trump campaign were absolute lies. In fact, an FBI lawyer even was convicted for censoring the CIA memo to the FBI saying Page works for us as not an agent, but an asset, a loyal American patriot who always debriefed the CIA anytime he met with an important Russian businessman or government official. And this liar framed him essentially for treason.
So, Scott, I mean, I think it's so great that somebody got to actually, who knows Russiagate, who really understands, because so many people in the Trump MAGA world are like, oh, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, but they conflate everything together. And somebody who really understands, as this book Provoked has, 100 pages, just detailing every single lie told, debunking every one of them. But just, I guess, take a minute and explain how nefarious Russiagate was, and Christopher Steele, the liar you just called out there, what his role in it was.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, yes, it's absolutely crucial. As you implied there, the war would have never started if they hadn't had done the Russiagate plot against Donald Trump back in 2015 and 16 through 19. By doing so, they essentially completely precluded the possibility that he would be able to do what he was elected to do. Remember, he ran explicitly on getting along with Russia. And so we shouldn't be enemies with Russia. There's no reason for it at all. And then Hillary accused him of treason in the summer of 2016 for months leading up to the election in November. And then he won anyway. You might have thought the American people wanted him to pursue exactly the policy that he ran on that issue. But instead, they framed him. And there's so much to it. But, and we'll get back to some of the details about Steele in a second. But the context, and, you know, it's funny, Kyle. Our friend Joe Mullen is a college professor. And he told me he was going off about Russiagate to his college kids. And then he realized they were staring at him. They had no idea what he was talking about because they were 9. That's how long ago it was. These college kids were little children, and it's like ancient history to them. But it's, you know, it's ever present to me. So the thing of it is this, that they tried to, first of all, cheat and prevent him from being elected with this lie about him and his campaign staff. Then after he was elected, They did have a plot, and they did not follow through with this. It was impossible to do, but they wanted to get Michael Morrell, who was the acting director of the CIA, to brief the Electoral College and tell them that Donald Trump was a traitor and stolen the election in collusion with the Kremlin, and that therefore they should all give it to Hillary Clinton, or barring that, at least to throw it to the House of Representatives, so that then the House of Representatives could give it to Paul Ryan or John Kasich or Colin Powell. And I know that sounds crazy. That's why in the book I have about 16 footnotes for just that one set of short series of claims there. Read it and weep. I'm sorry. I know it sounds completely crazy, but that's why I linked to Vox.com and the Washington Post and very Democrat-friendly outlets that are describing this plan at the time. But that's the thing about the Electoral College is it's made up of members of the party from out in the country, not the Georgetown cocktail party set. And so they were not able to get what they wanted there. Then they tried to come up with a plan, at least, and they again failed in this, but they wanted very much, and there's so much talk about this, you can read all about it. They wanted to use the 25th Amendment, which would be for like if Woodrow Wilson has a stroke or Joe Biden is absolutely demented and out of his mind and his wife is running cabinet meetings, then you use the 25th Amendment to remove them from power for being, essentially physically unable. I forget the exact language, but being unable to discharge the duties of the presidency. And they mean unable like in a legitimate physical sense, not we really want to overthrow our president. And anyway, so all that failed. So then they told CNN, well, at least we can launch this special counsel investigation, which they pretended to investigate for another 2 years in a row. And they said that the purpose of this was to rein him in, to prevent him from implementing his Russia policy. And as Keith Gesson has a quote from, I'm pretty sure it's one of Trump's guys. I always need to double check this quote, but you can read it in there. It's whoever it was someone powerful in Washington saying, when it comes to Russia, Trump is like the captain of a ship. He has his hands on the wheel, but it's not attached to anything. The national government has, as Alexander Vindman explained during the impeachment in Ukraine Gate, son of Russia Gate there, that the interagency has a foreign policy. The government, the empire itself, state and defense and USAID and CIA and the deputies committee, they've decided what our policy is, and Donald Trump has no right to change it. That was the thinking, and that was really, by then at least, by the early part of his presidency, that was the purpose of Russiagate. The avowed purpose of it was to prevent him from carrying out the policy that he was elected to carry out, which was to get along with Russia, i.e., end the ongoing civil war in Ukraine. And it took all of his political capital on that issue away. Remember, when he even went to Helsinki, it didn't matter what happened there. The fact that he met with Putin at all, that made it a treason summit. It's the treason summit. All the Democrats and all the former spooks and all of the national security state and media all agreed just for meeting with Putin at all. And so that, and right now there's a book that's almost done by the great Aaron Maté, who is, it's actually Mate. I always say it wrong. It's just like the name Matt with an A on the end. Mate. Aaron Mate has a book, and I'm sorry I forget the title of it. I've already ordered the thing. And it's all about Russiagate and the war. And so, I have a bit of that in my book. As you mentioned, I have about 75 to 100 pages on all the gates in the first Trump term. And the role, as part of the lead up to the war. And but Aaron Mate I quote him 100 times because he's the journalist who did such great work on it. He and Matt Taibbi, of course, and a lot of other great journalists who I cite in there really did the work on that. And then, so Steele specifically, he comes in a little bit late. It was John Brennan at CIA who started the thing with the frame up of Papadopoulos and then, sending his informant, working with the FBI to send their informants to infiltrate the Trump government or Trump campaign team. That began in late 2015. But then, so they brought in the FBI on that, and it was shortly after that, really, that the Democrats kind of launched their own sort of parallel Russiagate hoax along with them. And that was Hillary Clinton, what the later investigator John Durham called the Clinton Plan. The Clinton Plan was to use this law firm, Perkins Coie, in order to, um, embellish this story. And that law firm was behind the guys that ran that law firm. They were behind all different aspects of the Russiagate hoax after that, most prominently the Steele dossier, Christopher Steele dossier, which they had outsourced. He's a subcontractor working for a guy named Glenn Simpson at a company called Fusion GPS. Then they also hired a team of technical experts from Georgia Tech University. And these were the guys who came up with the Alpha Bank hoax that said that Donald Trump's server was in secret communication with Russian intelligence by way of the Alpha Bank, when it was nothing but a Donald Trump hotel spam bot is all the thing was. It's just all this is embellished nonsense. And then they had a whole thing about Russian DNS addresses and Yada phones, which is a Russian brand of smartphone that supposedly were within range of Trump Tower and all this stuff. And they were not just pushing this stuff into the media, because a lot of this stuff got out in the media later, but the original mission was to push this into the FBI in order to just get the investigation going, give them whatever predicates, which they had already, they were already using Papadopoulos, but they quickly abandoned Papadopoulos as a predicate for the investigation because it was so hollow, and he'd been framed by the FBI in the first place, or working with the CIA, parts of their counterintelligence divisions. But then when the Steele dossier came out, they glommed onto its lies about Carter Page in order to, the guy we were talking about in that clip, in order to have a predicate to investigate the campaign team. And then once they had an official investigation into Page, they were able to go through 1 hops and 2 hops and et cetera to investigate anyone on the campaign team that they wanted to, essentially. And the whole thing completely snowballed from there. And the thing about Carter Page, as I was saying, is he was essentially a low-level functionary on the campaign team. He was nobody special to them. They didn't know him very well, and he was not crafting American foreign policy or any kind of powerful thing. He was just trying to get a gig as an advisor there. And he was essentially an oil company consultant type, and he would travel to Russia all the time. And as I said in that clip, he was a CIA asset. He's a loyal American patriot. He's doing business in Russia. He obviously wants to not go to prison for doing something wrong or crossing anybody's line or stepping on any intelligence agency's toes. And so every time he goes there, he debriefs the CIA. And so when the FBI asked the CIA, tell us about your boy here, they sent a memo saying, yeah, he works for us. He's a patriot. He's a good guy. And he tells us everything he knows. Well, the FBI then erased that. A guy named Kleinsmith erased that from the memo. And then they used the memo without it, with that information censored out of it, to defraud the judges on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court so that they could get a FISA warrant under the allegation that this member of Trump's campaign team was an agent of a foreign power, which means they don't need probable cause of a crime. They just need a reasonable belief, Your Honor, that he's working on behalf of a foreign power. And then what did they do, Kyle? They go to Donald Trump and say, oh, no, we think that this guy might be a spy and you should keep your distance from him. Hell no, because they knew they were lying. It was all about trying to build up all different little pieces of cases, enough where every white lady out there could go, oh, wow, it's a conspiracy theory for me to believe in. Look at all the different pieces. They all fit together and whatever it was.
Right.
So,
And Scott, I just want to ask you here to follow up, because I think a lot of the conspiracy rested in this idea, and a lot of what I think is so important to understanding why Americans, so many of them, cheered on Joe Biden as he refused to negotiate with Russia, as he sent weapons to Ukraine and encouraged the Ukraine to fight this war that has led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, and the Ukraine losing more territory than they otherwise would have had he just made a deal at the start of the war.
Yep.
But the reason that this was was all cheered on was Trump had interacted with foreign agents, the Russian government, in order to swing the election. And I think one of the brilliant things that you confront Steele on in the Piers Morgan is that he was actually the foreign agent that tried to influence the American election. And worse, he was using Russians and potentially even a Russian spy in all of this. And so I want to play this next clip. Just remind people quickly to go ahead and share this. If you're watching this stream on X, repost it. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment and subscribe to the channel. Let's play this next clip.
And by the way, his primary sources were a Russian named Danchenko, who had been under investigation for being a Russian spy in the past. And the only reason they had dropped is because they mistakenly thought he left the country. And then his partner, an American named Dolan, who actually was a registered agent of Russia. And they were the two primary sources who made up all those lies that you and I just recited, Pierce, that made it into Steele's dossier that they used. And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he was nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies. It's incredible.
So, Scott, I'm going to confess, I watched the last 15 seconds of that probably 10 or 15 times in a row. I thought it was absolutely amazing. But really, how can this guy show his face in public? I mean, he's behind this massive conspiracy theory that, again, remember, during Obama's second presidential run in 2012, he mocked Mitt Romney and then won the vote of the people, right? Because Mitt Romney had Cold War ideology. So how in basically 3 years do we get from we should get along and improve our relationship with Russia to anybody who has that opinion is an agent of Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin? And Christopher Steele is, I mean, obviously Hillary Clinton owns her role in this too, but without Christopher Steele's dossier and how this is leaked out to the public, I mean, I don't think this happens. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, he says in there, well, you know, the dossier was never meant to be released to the public. No, it's just meant to be deep background material for reporters writing all about it. And it was meant to help to spur the FBI investigation of the guy based on a bunch of lies. So who cares whether it was ever supposed to be posted in total on BuzzFeed or not? It clearly, its purpose was to help frame Trump for treason. And I'm actually kicking myself, Kyle. Somebody posted a really funny gif of George Costanza from Seinfeld driving and going, "That's what I should have said." That's me. Because there's all kinds of lies. And right there where I just got mad and said, "Oh, I can't believe that this guy is, you know, out in public and whatever." I really should have said, you see, I just kind of stopped right there. And Pierre's like, "Oh, I should say something." I should have said, and by the way, and I promised to keep my answers shorter for the rest of the day here, but let me please continue to point out that what this guy said about Michael Flynn was also lies. And you know, some of these kooks even implicated Scaramucci, the guy who's on the panel, was falsely accused of being tied to the Russians somehow through some business deal or whatever. The guy himself, Michael Flynn, who's a 3-star general. Steele said, "Oh, Michael Flynn's problems with Kislyak, the ambassador." No, they lied about that. They literally made up a fake transcript, or at least they had the vice president pretend that he was reading off a fake transcript. Apparently, they made a fake transcript to show Vice President Pence and make it look like Flynn had made promises to the Russian ambassador and then lied to Pence about that. And that was completely not true. And when they finally released the real transcripts, it showed that, yeah, there you go. It finally showed that he had not done any such thing. And of course, they pretended to use the Logan Act, which is a law that was passed in the George Washington administration, has never been successfully prosecuted. They've only tried to bring charges under it twice in American history, and it's completely obviously against the First Amendment. Although I'm not really sure, it kind of seems reasonable on its face. Private American citizens not making deals with foreign nation states, but clearly it's completely preposterous that that would apply in this circumstance when this guy is a 3-star general, retired still, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and right-hand man, head of intelligence for Special Operations Command, or for JSOC even, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and McChrystal's head of intelligence in the Afghan surge.
Well, and he
is
was
the designated, wait, real quick, just he's the designated national security advisor of the president-elect incoming. And he has a conversation on the phone with the Russian ambassador where he doesn't promise anything. He asked the Russian ambassador, it'd be nice if you guys did not escalate sanctions in response to Obama's new sanctions on you. He didn't promise to do anything for them at all. And he also asked them to vote against an anti-Israel resolution on the UN Security Council, and they told him no. So that's goes to show their real relationship right there. They totally lied about him. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to add that Flynn was the designated to be national security advisor. Right. And this seems much like Steve Witkoff this time around, leaning on Netanyahu to go ahead and accept the ceasefire deal before Trump was technically in office, but he was president-elect and Witkoff was his Middle East envoy. So,
and think of how preposterous it would be if you said, he was violating the Logan Act because he was, working on a peace deal, as Joe Biden is literally the lamest of ducks waiting for Trump to come in. And you notice how nobody accused Trump of violating the Logan Act by having Witkoff do any of that. It was clearly brought up by Joe Biden, Vice President Biden at the time, as a red herring accusation against Flynn, as a phony pretext, again, for the FBI to investigate. Oh man, and I'm sorry. I wish I had. I did have a better list in my head the other day of all the stuff. I had reread the Steele section there of all the different lies, the different hoaxes that Steele had put up there. But the most important part of it, I guess, really is Page, because he was the one that they really then used as the predicate for the investigation.
Right. Well, Sky, I just want to point out here and have your thoughts on this, where this really seems to, pervade American political speaking even until today. In a Time magazine article published yesterday, this is a story that I will have out for the Libertarian Institute in just a couple hours here. Zelensky was, the Ukrainian president, was chastising the Trump administration, saying that Russian propaganda had infiltrated the thinking there. And this idea that Donald Trump is too close to Vladimir Putin, where, as you document in Provoked very thoroughly, Trump was not a Russia dove during his first administration. You go through and explain how he vacated arms control agreements, how he sanctioned Russia, how he expelled Russian diplomats, how he sent weapons to Ukraine. None of these steps were the actions of a Russian dove or somebody who is in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. Yet that is the accusation. And if you look at the mainstream media today, there's a story from Politico, 7 ways Donald Trump is giving Vladimir Putin too much ground. And all the thinking and all the hype is still around this idea that Donald Trump is a puppet of Vladimir Putin. So, Scott, in all of your research, do you come across anything to make this sound true, or is this just still really the same Russiagate? Because even though the conspiracy has been debunked, the main part of that narrative still seems to be alive.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's simply like the echo of it, right? It's the spirit of the thing still floating around out there. If it wasn't for the phony pretext in the background, or the phony context in the background, then when Witkoff says things like, Vladimir Putin was very flattering when I met with him, would not be suspicious. Like, it's called diplomacy, and I can't remember who it was, but I saw the national security people all retweeting each other, talking about how, because Witkoff described to Tucker Carlson how when he met with Putin, that Putin told him, how concerned he was, how he prayed for Trump when he was shot, and because he considers him a friend. And they go, see, Putin's got Trump wrapped around his little finger. And it's like, come on, you could take a compliment, just say thank you when somebody says something nice, and you could, gauge it. Even if Witkoff took it, as complete sincerity, that doesn't mean that Trump took it as complete sincerity. Like, you know what I mean? Your business rival says, I'm very sorry about what happened to you that I heard about your bad news or whatever. You go, okay, right? What are you going to do? You're going to fight based on when you're trying to solve a thing? That doesn't make him a sucker. If you go back, Colin, remember when he was dealing with Kim Jong-un, they're just recycling the same, narrative that they did against him back when he's trying to make peace with North Korea in his first term. They just said, oh, everybody knows that Donald Trump is absolutely the world's worst deal maker, and that somehow North Korea holds all the cards and they're just going to walk all over Donald Trump. They're going to make a chump out of Trump. He's such a sucker. He's such a loser. And he's up against that wily, crafty, brilliant, commie genius, Kim Jong-un, who clearly is going to alpha dog Trump and lead him around the room like a poodle and make him sign on the bottom line and do whatever North Korea says. And what was the basis for any of that? The only thing that they could build off of was, well, Barack Obama never saw fit to make peace with North Korea. So obviously, if it was a good idea, Obama would have done it, I guess. Otherwise, what was their argument? They had no argument whatsoever. They only had a narrative, and it was just like, oh, Joe Biden's fiery State of the Union speech, or he's so sharp as attack, or whatever it was, that they just had that narrative. And remember, this is in the dark days of liberal Twitter, too, and just as at the start of the Ukraine war, as you said, where Russiagate, had totally infected the brains of all these people. And this was the liberal Twitter swarm that dominated the most important website, for American public opinion at that time. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on this Twitter swarm.
Well, I mean, Scott, I do want to, it's probably good because I really do want to ask you about the Israel situation here. And I have another clip from your appearance on Piers Morgan talking about that. So let's go ahead and play this next clip.
Well, I don't know about his poll numbers and what's really behind all that. I hope it's because a huge part of the MAGA right is trying to hold him to his word about America first, not Israel instead. And I guess that goes to our next topic, or one of our topics today, is the horrible war there, and Donald Trump acting just like Joe Biden, just like Kamala Harris would in his position, giving Netanyahu a blank check to cancel the peace deal and bomb whoever he feels like, including a hell of a lot of children. If you look at x.com in the feed there at the horrific pictures coming out of Palestine there. And it's the most obvious contradiction. You can't be America first and Israel instead. It's got to be one or the other. And I know the American right is almost solidly on the side of Israel in almost all cases, but everybody's got their limit. And, the American right used to really believe in George W. Bush in the Iraq War until they decided they didn't anymore. And I think there's a big crack up coming on the right, because what we're supporting there is just absolutely horrific. I mean, they're talking about, oh, well, maybe we'll just transfer the population to Syria so they can go live under the rule of Al-Qaeda that America and Turkey just helped install in power there, and Israel helped install in power there. I mean, this is completely insane, what they're talking about and what they seem to have in mind. I don't know if they have an idea of how they mean to accomplish it. But I was having a good time watching Elon Musk fire government employees, and I'm angry at the judges every time that they turn back these firings. And I don't extend that to the immigration thing. That's different. But I mean specifically those guys who were just deported to El Salvador, whether they'd ever been there before in their lives. But a lot of these judge rulings drive me crazy. I love seeing the death of U.S. aid, or at least, its massive diminishment, and a lot of the rest of this stuff.
So before I ask Scott the next question, just want to ask people to go ahead and repost this show. We have a few hundred of you watching live right now on Etsy. If you are on Etsy and want to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss future episodes of the show, I did go ahead and post a link in the reply, so it's very easy to find. Now, Scott, you mentioned there in the beginning of your reply that this is supposed to be an American first administration and not Israel first administration. but it just seems like the Israel issue is dominating the Trump administration, just like he's, 5 decade Zionist Joe Biden, who has supported Israel, for decade after decade. We're supposed to have the candidate who's bucking that establishment. And so, I mean, do you see any sign here that Trump is going to maybe? I mean, I know we're not going to get Trump treating Netanyahu like he treated Zelensky in the Oval Office, but maybe have some kind of more balanced Israel policy here, or is he just in line as far as you could tell when it comes to Tel Aviv?
Well, what a great question. Wouldn't we all like to know? I mean, we're just at the very start of this 4-year term now again, and he's already gone so far for them. There's been some deviations, but then the Israelis have won, right? So when Trump's special emissary was dealing with Hamas separately and was making a deal to get the one living American hostage out in the bodies of the other American hostages, and make a trade, the Israelis intervened and got the guy fired. He said too much. He went on CNN and started blabbing. He should have not talked. He should have told Jake Tapper that, listen, I got a job to do here. I can't screw it up by saying a bunch of things to you, but I promise we're doing our best and we'll take care of Israeli interests as best we can, and left it at that. Got himself in big trouble by describing that, yeah, we're doing what we can to take care of America's interests because I work for Donald Trump, not Netanyahu, or whatever his exact words. So, and that was it. They got him out of there. According to the Israeli media, there was no question. It was the Israelis. It wasn't even pro-Israelis in America. It was the Israelis who made phone calls and got the guy canned.
Yeah.
But then as we saw, I don't know how many people in your audience, I guess the big news today is how Jeffrey Goldberg got added to the Signal chat where Trump's national security team was plotting to bomb Yemen again.
Mhm.
And JD Vance tried to, put a little bit of a break on it. And the rest of the team, I guess, either said nothing or said, go for it. And the Secretary of Defense wanted to do it, and they went ahead and did it. And I guess the National Security Advisor as well. And so, they're spreading the war to Yemen, and that does, it clearly does, raise the risk of a full-scale, just regional war against Shiite power there. That's the danger, is that the narrative becomes we're fighting Iranian power in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, which, I don't know, not much left in Syria. Israel's fighting them in southern Lebanon. In Iraq, mostly when they go out, they are killing ISIS guys, not Shiites. They're killing, what's left of the bin Ladenites, but they could still pick a fight with the Shiites in Iraq if they want. I mean, that's really the danger. Honestly, Kyle, I'm not certain that Benjamin Netanyahu wants war and regime change in Iran. I think that the status quo has served him very well. They're not making nuclear weapons. They have the potential to make nuclear weapons, and that, I guess, is part of the motive. That's enough to help scare the Sunni kings into Israel's camp when Israel's willing to get along with them. And the Netanyahu doctrine, essentially, right, is to make friends with the Sunnis and find a way to do so without making a deal with the Palestinians, right? So it's sort of Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres's policy, only without the compromising with the Palestinians at all part. But otherwise, make friends with the closer states and turn them against the periphery. So that's been the doctrine, really, with his twist on it since the mid-1990s. And I think that's basically what he's pursuing. One thing that Witkoff said to Tucker Carlson in that interview was, and you know what, it seemed like this was in direct response to what Carlson asked him about what Israel wants for the region. Although you could interpret it to mean that this is what Trump's team is thinking about too. I'd have to go back and get his exact words. The question was about what Israel wants. And he said they might recognize the new regime in Damascus, the new al-Qaeda regime under Jolani. And it was funny, like, I don't know whose talking points these are, but Witkoff starts kind of waxing on about, geez, I'm not the same guy I was when I was a young man. Everybody changes, and maybe this guy's going to be all right after all. And this is a guy who went to go join the Mujahideen in celebration of the September 11th attack on the United States, and then fought Americans in Fallujah, and then was sent by Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, to go start the war in Syria in 2011, and was responsible for absolutely heinous war crimes, including beheadings and suicide bombings and all kind of madness in the last war there. But he had this whole thing about, I don't know, maybe it'll turn out to not be so bad. And so that would be in keeping with the idea that, especially if they're basically tamed by the Turks and act as subcontractors of the Turks, the Al-Qaeda guys, I mean, that maybe the Israelis and the Turks and the Al-Qaeda guys can come to an agreement about how to divvy up Syria. And so I think there's a lot of talk about it, but I think there's probably not going to be a war with Iran. But that is the risk they're taking, essentially, by putting us on the side of Israel to the degree that they are. I mean, it really could escalate to that. And especially, when Trump and his people, a lot of times they just kind of accept these premises and arguments and then just repeat them and make themselves convince themselves, I guess, that oh yeah, everybody knows that the Houthis are the Iranians. They do whatever Iran says, and Iran is responsible for everything that they do. I mean, imagine if Russia held America responsible for everything Ukraine did. And it's, there's a great article years ago called "The Houthis Are Not Hezbollah," about how there's, really are very independent from Tehran. Hell, Tehran told them not to sack the capital city of Sana'a back 10 years ago, and they did it anyway, starting the war with Saudi Arabia at that time. Well, getting a war against them started at that time.
Right. And you could almost imagine that if Tehran did have influence in Sana'a, that they would be telling Ansar Allah or the Houthis not to move forward with the attack. I mean, for all the talk we heard over the years of Iran will never allow Assad to fall, Iran will never allow Hezbollah to be beaten, we've seen them allow that to happen. And while there has been some confrontation between Iran and Israel over the past year and a half, it really hasn't been all that close to an all-out war. And I guess if you're cold calculating Netanyahu, you really could see the opportunity where you've gotten what you want when it comes to creating greater Israel. You've gotten southern Lebanon, you've gotten southern Syria. The Gaza Strip is utterly destroyed, and now you're working on the West Bank. Iran isn't launching any attacks. Why risk escalating to the extent with Iran where they then develop a nuclear weapon? And they really do have maybe geopolitical leverage that they didn't have before. But the last question I want to ask you is really about the news of the day you're talking about there. This Atlantic article where Jeffrey Goldberg mysteriously, or I guess not mysteriously, he identifies Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, as the person who allowed him to enter into this chat with all other high-ranking American officials, the vice president, the secretary of defense, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, on this chat discussing strikes on Yemen. And even before the actual strikes happen, Goldberg is aware that they're going to happen because they've announced it in this group chat. And rather than doing some really interesting journalism, he says that, he kind of recounts what happens, but he says he left the group chat. I guess as unimpressive as it is that our administration allowed some journalists in this high ranking group chat and apparently discuss sensitive information with him, Goldberg's reporting on this just seems utterly disgraceful to me, and way not to in any way try to exploit this information that you've learned to bring information to the American people about this unconstitutional war being waged by our government. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. Your point, I would just echo that he wasn't interested in warning the American people that, oh no, they're going to attack Yemen or anything like that. His only the story is about their lapse in operational security here, which is an important thing. And it goes to show that Mike Waltz is buddies with Goldberg, although apparently not close enough that Goldberg would, protect him on this. And apparently he was added inadvertently, because at least the way Goldberg reported it, Waltz did not say to him, hey, I'm going to add you to this group on background or on the record or any kind of thing. He just did it, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if that means he got orders from Tel Aviv to add Jeffrey Goldberg to the group chat or what, you know?
I guess I just point out in Goldberg's story, really the only person that is kind of painted to look bad is JD Vance, as he's the one arguing against this. And so you do wonder if maybe Mike Waltz was trying to sabotage Vance. So anyways, Scott Horton, antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute, you're the man there. The new book is Provoked. It's absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend it. Right now, if you're a regular reader of antiwar.com, I have been publishing excerpts of that book every couple of weeks, and they're absolutely fantastic. The thing I love about publishing these excerpts, Scott, is I've really realized that each little section is almost self-contained, in that you don't even have to read the entire George W. Bush or the entire Donald Trump section or even the entire Russiagate section. You could read about the Christopher Steele dossier and just get so much information on that. So, I mean, a really fantastic book, Scott. I recommend everybody check it out. I know we were offering a signed copy of Provoked for at the Libertarian Institute fundraiser, but I believe today we just met our fundraising goal. So that's huge. And Scott's, any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's great. I didn't know that. And actually I have great news, which is another donor offered $5,000 worth of matching funds. So we can keep going. And right, the catch is we don't get the 5,000 unless we raise 5,000 more. So we better raise 5,000 more so we can get 10,000 more. So everybody stop by the Institute, help me pay my guys. We don't have a giant palace in Washington, D.C. like the Cato Institute. We're not spending your money on fancy hotels for conferences and all kinds of stuff. The money basically just goes for payroll and book production. And even that's just payroll, right? Paying editors and artists to do work. And that's it. And it's just, what do we got? 25 and counting, 26, 27 great writers, great handful of podcasters, of course, including Kyle and Keith and Tommy Salmons. And I don't know what happened to Patrick. Is he still around?
Yeah, he did an episode pretty recently.
Oh, great. So, and of course, William Bupert, our great military expert. I mean, we've got all these great podcasts. And then recently we brought on Jose Nino and Jack Hunter and this guy, Matt Wolfson, who's this great journalist. And of course, we have the great Brad Pierce and on and on and on. All of our great writers, the heroic Jim Bovard and Sheldon Richmond, Lori Calhoun and Ted Carpenter, our senior fellows. And man, we're killing it. We got a great institute, but we just need money. And the way it works, it's a 501c3 thing. And so you donate to us and then we give you all the stuff we do for free, kind of. So that's how it works. And we got great books as kickbacks, including, as you mentioned, you can get a signed copy of Provoked for a limited time as a donation as a kickback for your donation there. And we got tote bags and we got little USB drives that have the audio book of Fool's Errand and Enough Already on them. And it looks just like a little book. So your wives and girlfriends will like that because it's a smaller version of a bigger thing. And girls like stuff like that. So, and then it's got audiobooks on them, which is just me talking for many hours in a row. And everybody likes that. So that's libertarianinstitute.org/donate. Help keep Kyle Anzalone employed, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Scott. And just want to remind everyone before we wrap up here to go ahead and share out this show, but also head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. We are trying to incorporate more guests on this show. So if you want to make a suggestion on who you think would be a good person for me to interview, subscribe to the YouTube channel and then leave us a comment. Kind of let us know who you think I should interview. I'm happy to interview pretty much anyone. And we'll be back with another show again soon.